Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
All right, we have Lynn. Lynn has been on before. She is an author, of course, a great author called When Family Calls. And her name is Lynn. Well, it's really Caroline Sheppard, but we call her Carolyn Sheppard. But she likes to be called Lynn, and we're going to do that now. We're going to really talk about this wonderful book she wrote, When Family Calls, and it's hope. It's really hope in the chaos of long-distance caregiving. But I have to say that it's just hope when you're helping someone, there's chaos, whether you're long distance or whether you're local. It's something we're not prepared for, are we, Lynn?
No, it is something that you really aren't prepared for, but there are things you can do to help prepare if it happens or when it happens. But it's very true. It's especially when you get a phone call out of the blue, and that's how it starts.
So let me ask you this. After this experience, have you been able to knowingly help people, besides writing your book, which was great? Have you been in support groups? Have you actually done blogs? What do you do to help people?
Well, actually, when I finished the book, I think one of the things that has happened is that people know now that have read it what I went through, and that's opened a door to discussions with people that are friends or have found themselves in the same types of experiences of caregiving, or they now can anticipate better or imagine, boy, what might that be like? So I have had the opportunity to talk to people personally, and that's been, I think, very helpful to them. And also it gives me a sense of that sometimes you feel like, why me? Why did that happen? In retrospect, then you think, well, yes, I can help people because of what I learned, which is what the book was about. But as far as your question, I have done recently a presentation with a co-presenter that's in the world of gerontology and hospice, and so there was an audience to talk to. I'd like to do more of that. I've done a couple of podcasts and interviews much like this, and every time I find that something new surfaces that can be talked about, because caregiving is filled with so many issues, everything from financial to medical to legal, to navigating systems, hospitals, assisted living, finding help, resources. So there's so many layers to it. But I do find that I have a passion for it now after taking care of 5 different family members over 15 years for 5 different issues. So my background in social work gave me a leg up, I say, before I entered the world of caregiving, because I had a background in being an advocate. It just happened to be I was an advocate for children and families. And then I became an advocate for my family members. To me, that's a very important piece of caregiving, and it also can be a very intimidating part of caregiving when you're in a big system and they're telling you one thing and your gut is telling you, I don't think that's what I want for my family member. So I guess the book is out since October, basically. So it's still fresh, and I hope to do more and more to get, connected to other caregivers. Support group. You asked about a support group. While I was a caregiver, I considered it. When my brother had cancer, I remember there were options in the hospital, and I just couldn't find the time because I was a long-distance caregiver. So I was in and out or managing so many things when I was there. I did not always take time for me, which I've learned is extremely important. You talked about finding hope in the chaos of long-distance caregiving, which is my subtitle to When Family Calls, because you can really be lost in a sea of stress sometimes. So finding even the support group, just getting yourself organized is not easy. However, now, 15 years after when I started taking care of the first family member, my father, I found a support group in the area through the Council on Aging where I am, which you just have to look in your area to see if there is something like it. So I was invited to be a part of it, basically because I had gone to see what resources they had and to ask if they'd be interested in a children's book I had done back in 1998. It was called Brave Bard, and it's a story for traumatized and grieving children. So for 4 to 10-year-olds, basically that's the age group. But I had talked to her about that I was in the process, the organizer of the group, the woman that runs it. I had talked to her about that I was in process of writing When Family Calls, and then I said, I really would like to learn more about what you do here. And then she said, well, when you have the book out, I have a couple other caregivers, and we're going to do an event in the fall, so you can each present. And that was my first experience standing up in front of other caregivers. And at that point, these were current caregivers. And I just find that caregivers need a community. They need, they say that you need a village. I think it's a community, and if you can find others, you can get so much information from each other, because they may have figured out a piece of the puzzle that you just haven't been able to figure out yet. When we're so overwhelmed with the crisis calls, which was much of my 5 different situations, really were filled with crisis calls. And when you're very, very far away with long-distance care, which is far more common today, you have the boomers review. Well, baby boomers, that's what it's about. It's just it's a different experience. We don't live close by so often. So that's what I would like to do, is connect with caregivers, because I think when you hear that first time somebody else say something and you go, wow, oh, good. I guess other people feel this lost or this overwhelmed, scattered. I said I felt like a rat on the wheel some days.
Right.
I just didn't know what to do first, and always had my bag packed.
Well, see, and that's one thing to think about when you're even local. You just get in your car and you're where you are now. You're talking about getting on airplanes. You're talking about all that trauma of, it's a flight ride. You have to get to where you're going. It could be good weather, bad weather. Mm-hmm. So it brings a lot of other problems. But let me tell you something. Our book of the month for June is called Graceful Exit, and it's by Dr. Gustavo Ferrer, because he offers actually an all-in-one resource for anyone who's tasked with managing the end-of-life care of a loved one. And it's a fabulous book. It really gets into the stuff that we kind of close our eyes to and don't think about it. You, as that person that has to face that all the time, you probably have made mistakes, not because it's just a hard thing to do. But this book, he's a pulmonologist, and he's from Cuba, and he's just an amazing guy. So that's something that I think, I've never seen a book quite like this, but I think that if you and I had a book like this, it even would have made our lives easier.
Oh, sure, and that's one reason I write about each one of my 5 experiences, and trying to, here's a big piece of it. I think that we're getting better because of books like the one you just mentioned, Exiting Gracefully, is that?
Yes.
Okay, yes. I found that I did not have the experience, and part of the problem with our family, all of them, nobody had any plans in place, and there's so much more of an effort now for people to help others to realize that, to have the conversation with your family, to have things in place. In fact, I just got email through the caregiver newsletter from caregiver.com, where there's a system in place now. And this isn't a plug, but I was just reading about it because this company is responding to how when you're not nearby, or even just not knowing where your family's important documents are, if they thankfully have them, that's another issue. And one of it is talking about end of life and having the advanced directives. And nobody in my family did. And so then you're dealing with it when it's at a very critical moment, and it's good to try and plan ahead. I remember trying to talk to my brother about the 5 wishes, because by the time I was caring for him, it was 2010 when the hospital that we were in had a document where he could expressly say what he wanted. Did he want to be on a feeding tube? No. Did he want extreme measures? What did he want? Well, that conversation didn't go well because he was only 58 years old, and he really didn't want to even think about it, talk about it. And he was very, very sick. So I actually asked a friend, and I write about what I did when I ran into resistance. A common theme when you're helping family for me was resistance for assistance. In other words, they still want to be independent, and they don't. It's pretty hard to face when you think you can't manage your affairs anymore. My father, a lawyer that didn't have everything in place, that was a shock, and it was very disorganized because of a dementia situation. You go into somebody else's world in their home and try to find things that are very important. So there's more and more help out there now that has evolved because of situations like mine, and I think that we're in a fortunate time for caregivers as far as if you can find the time to access the resources, and if you don't know where to go or what to do, then find somebody that can help you. But we sometimes end up trying to go it alone, and it's just, you really need somebody to help you along, especially with end-of-life issues.
Lynn, I dare anyone to come into my apartment and try to find the things they need from me if something happens to me.
Me too. Well, that's why I said, just had the conversation with my husband. I said, we had things pretty well in place, but then you move. Okay, where is it? Right. We don't have children. But then, I say, God help whoever has to come. So I really do want to. I mean, I write about it, how horrible it was to be the recipient of the responsibility of chaos.
Right, Yeah, when my husband's mother, my husband was an only son, and she passed away up in Maryland, and we'd been sending her money and trying to take care of things for her every month, and so we didn't know that she had what she had or anything, but when we got into her apartment and we started getting through things and I started seeing bank receipts and stuff, it turned out that she had really put away a nice bit of money, and in her safety deposit box she had cash and all. We didn't know any of that. Now, that had nothing to do with taking care of her, but that's the same kind of a thing that, you're still faced with all this and you really haven't kept up with it.
Yeah, it's hard, and especially now my parents, you expect to take care of your parents. It's a potential that's going to happen. All right? So that one it was shocking because of how suddenly it happened, but in some ways not. Then as far as my brother, it was a shock because of his age, and it was very, it was a critical time. And he passed within 6 months. And he didn't have anybody else in his world at the time to take care of him or take care of his situation. Now, my aunt and uncle, that was a whole other story. They did not have children, and I was very close to them. So it was a little more complicated because I wasn't on any of the documentation. So that took a little bit more. And again, I was flying in and out. So, yeah, being prepared is really important. Finding things, it made me think of my aunt and uncle. So they did have a safe deposit box. However, all of their bank information was very confusing because you know how bank names change.
Oh,
so
yes, yes. Oh,
really,
my goodness.
it was so hard. So I'd get there and I'm like, okay, so that bank doesn't exist. For just serendipitous reasons, I was up there another time and visiting them, and I had gone through the bank teller line with my aunt, and it was a small town area where they lived. And so she introduced me to the teller. This is my niece, and that kind of thing. And so I knew that bank. And actually, when I went in there, I was able to say I actually was with my aunt. It wasn't as far, I don't remember how long ago, but it helped me have some credibility that I would, because at that point I really wasn't on any, power of attorney. Nothing was in place. I had encouraged them a couple of years before to go and put something in place, and they had. And my aunt, she had never signed it, and I would ask her because they didn't have children. Again, it was that disorganized situation, and again, these were very organized people. And then when I got to their house, it was a disaster.
No one ever faces what could happen, and even though, you were around this in so many ways as a social worker, and you were close to your aunt and uncle, you never could say, "Listen, do you have all your paperwork in order?" That's not something
No, it was
we
funny.
do.
Actually, it came up in a funny sort of way. My husband had a background in financial planning, and he said, I think it was something that they were worried about with somebody, some extended family on my uncle's side. And I think we said, well, do you have anything in place so that you can say? And then they said, no. And so it kind of woke them up to the fact. So he went, but my aunt just never could bring herself to do it. But again, I had lived in their area and worked in their area for many years. So I actually was able to find the legal office, and everything ended up working out. But again, with the wishes you were talking about with the June book, that's going to be very important to people. I talk about my experiences and how I figured things out in my book, but in hopes that when people read that they say, oh yeah, that's what we need to do. And if you're a child, you're going to have to ask your parents. I've had people in the boomer age like me, and they read it and they say, I got to get this together for my kids.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good result. You can think about it, but when you read about how disruptive it is,
yeah.
I mean, and difficult, and like you said, I challenge anybody to come in, and that's, I guess, our charge is to get it on paper and make a list.
Right.
These are my banks, and this is what I'd like at the end of my life. And
yep. Well, I have a great elder law attorney, and he has put a lot of things together, but it's all the simple things. So I keep going to QuickBooks and printing out my bank statements and all that, but it's so far from perfect. But I want everyone to know this delightful woman and so smart. And her name is Lynn Sheppard, Sheppard. She wrote a great, great book. I just love this book when I saw it. When Family Calls, Finding Hope in the Chaos of Long-Distance Caregiving. She was actually an angel to do what she did. When I went through that book, I just kept gasping about this woman, and she had such a positive energy, and it was a super thing that she did. Her family was very lucky, very fortunate to have her. And, I'm interested in the children's book. You're the author of a helpful children's book for trauma and loss issues. Are you going to, is that book out?
Oh, actually, that was my first children's book. It's Brave Bart, A Story for Traumatized and Grieving Children, and it is still in publication. It came out in 1998, and it is still being used by the National Institute for Trauma and Loss in Children and Star Global Learning Network. So On my website, all the other books I wrote, which were all children's books, this was my one and only book for adults, and I've written for bullying situations. Brave Bart comes back as an older, wiser cat, and he's Brave Bart and the Bully to help other. But anyway, so that book, it's written with non-threatening animal characters for children that have had something very bad, sad, and scary happen to them. So that book, interestingly, had just come out in 1998. My father's very, very serious stroke happened in '99, October '99. So it was a little less than a full year after the book came out, or a little more than a full year. And the Brave Bart, I remember thinking, boy, this experience with my father is a very bad, sad, and scary thing that happened to me as an adult. And, the same feelings happen for us as it does for children. And when things feel out of control and you feel helpless and powerless and hopeless, that's what goes along with trauma. And that can also go along with caregiving. When you feel like no matter what I'm doing, they're not getting better, So it's giving empowerment, I think that we have to have that feeling that we may not be able to change what happened, but we can change, the feelings and still help the people we're caring for.
Right. So I'm sure you're very affected by all the school shootings, and that book could be very important to those kids.
Yes, yeah. Brave Bart, as I said, it's been used even in Japan for the tsunami, and it's made its trips around the world.
Isn't that great?
Yeah,
That's absolutely great.
He said, I find it interesting, because people did encourage me to write about my stories, as it was going. They said, you should write a book about that, because they knew I did the kids' books. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's very different. My children's book was a whole other, that was different. And my dear brother, was my illustrator for two of them. And then I actually am working on one now that's coming out probably this summer on accepting differences. And
oh, boy.
That's going to be, it's
good for you.
Again, I use animal characters.
I was faced.
Right. It's a wonderful thing that you do. So I just want everyone to really consider buying this book. I think that eventually in your life, whether it's because you're in a long-distance situation or even a no-distance separation, even if your family lives at home with you, the things that Lynn put into this book, they were just amazing. I mean, I couldn't put the book down, and I kept thinking, what a terrific woman. And they were so lucky to have her, because she gave up her life, for 12 years, I think, don't you? Wasn't it
15. Yeah, and when you say you gave up I gave up my life, it was just a different turn down a different path.
Yeah, I understand that. But when someone does, I think a lot of us have taken care of our family members, and it really does make a difference in how we feel. But if you don't do it, you can imagine what it's like. I mean, I feel that once you've gone that route, then you feel, all right, you miss the person, but you've done everything possible to take care of them. It's really, I think, a golden rule. I mean, it's what you'd want someone to do for you. I hope that, of course, you have your husband, but I hope that you have other people who, would care about you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And that is one thing I know I talked to you the last interview. That,
right.
I didn't have children, so it opened up a different door. I mean, it made it more possible for me to drop things and go ahead. And I had taken a leave of absence and, written Brave Bart. Thought I was going back, but I didn't, from my school social work job. So, but I think the biggest benefit and reward of the whole thing was every relationship we have, our family relationships, there's always the issues that can happen, and with each one, it strengthened our bond, and and also resolved issues that maybe would never have been.
Yeah.
So, that was one of the big benefits.
Definitely. And that's how, that's how we have to look at this. Now, the other thing that's very hard is, at least down here, we have a lot of elder people that don't have families. Mm-hmm. They have friends, but a friend can't possibly do what you did. I mean, they just can't. I mean, it's just overwhelming for them. So what do? Well, sometimes they wind up with guardians, and that doesn't always work out so well. I don't know if you're,
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, I think if you have a family already, you're certainly, hopefully, have a bit of an advantage there. But, if you don't, then you have to rely on other types of resources and friends. I know with my aunt and uncle, I asked a friend to help them. It was a friend of one of their friends that I reached out to, my aunt's friends. And I said, I'm not here all the time. This is just one thing that I put together, and it ended up being a godsend. I said to my aunt, whatever happened to Melanie? And she had lived upstairs. And where is she? Oh, I have her in my book. I said, can we call her? Because I said, I know she doesn't live here, but I'd like her to know what's happened, to Uncle Fred and to you. And she said, oh, yeah, let's call her. I was actually lying on the bed with her and a mess of, kind of a mess. And we called, and I told her what had happened. And my aunt got on, but I said, is there anybody in the area? Because I have to leave. And my aunt was in very difficult situation, in bad shape. So, and it really couldn't drive, shouldn't drive. She did. She cheated sometimes, which was frightening. That's another issue. So, so you reaching out when you're long distance, and even when you're near distance, to find other people that can fill in. There's common threads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have to reach out to you and tell you that we have done it. We've had another wonderful interview. I loved every minute with it. And thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Well, thank you again, Anita.
Yeah, the name of that other book is Graceful Exit by Dr. Ferrer, Ferrer. It's an amazing book. But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, Lynn.